This training is best known as the 100% debt-free for life, including real estate class. The objectives are first to review who VIP is and why we're so uniquely valuable to Americans who use banks. And then I'm going to show you exactly what you can start doing today to create a better plan to save over $100,000 on every property you buy and finance. Even if you plan to only keep the property for a short period of time, this will rapidly increase the equity position that you have when you do sell. We're then going to review the exact steps that you can use to pay off all of your non-mortgage and business-related debts far more quickly. And when you practice the techniques I'm going to teach you here today the correct way, you're not only going to pay off your debt and raise your credit scores far more quickly, but you're also going to be able to invest on an accelerated basis. Finally, if you find as much value in this free education as we do, we make it very easy for you to share with the people that you care most about and even generate another revenue stream doing so. Before we begin, let me introduce you to our company. VIP Financial Education was initially founded in 2000, and it has been developed over this period of time by experts with over 400 years of combined financial expertise. Although I was privileged to help build the curriculum, I feel the education has taken on a life of its own. It's reached viewers in more than 15 countries, many of whom have written us to tell us of the life-changing impact that it's having on them. During the first year, we would share our classes for small audiences in person, and it was during this time that we began to realize that every visitor who was told about these short classes had the potential of having their life changed. And as we were teaching this information, we were also using the same strategies ourselves and seeing the results firsthand. Most of the thousands of feedback forms, emails, and letters that have been collected over the years are from regular people, regular families, and small business owners who are just tired of their plan taking so long. Most participants of this class gain a sense of hope and freedom that can only come from knowing that there's a better way to do things. This does not mean, of course, that everybody responds favorably to these classes. In many people, the old-fashioned attitude is deeply entrenched. Anybody who is reluctant to the idea that there is always more to learn or to a new way of thinking will inevitably fail to see what this financial education is all about. I feel confident that in the years to come, millions more will be drawn to the lifestyle-threatening topics of cash flow, debt management, and credit scoring. And VIP Financial Education will continue to make a vital contribution to the resources that are available. Today, it's your turn to experience these life-changing techniques and to modernize how your family works with the banks from this point forward, all while empowering yourself with a one-of-a-kind education on these subjects, which you can then pass on to your children and to their children and create a smoother path for your loved ones to travel on. Remember, it's because of feedback from viewers like you that has helped us build the trainings that are here now and what we can improve for the next time. And it's because viewers like you care about other people and share these classes that we are currently able to bring them to you for free. As a token of our appreciation for completing a few brief feedback questions at the end of today's training, we'll even provide you a second part to this training completely free as well, which is your own private one-on-one phone coaching hour with a certified expert who's going to help you start your plan to practice the powerful techniques that you learn in this training and more the safe way. For those who do qualify, we sell ongoing coaching in order to fast track the results of the information you're going to learn. And I encourage you to learn as much as you can about VIP at www.aboutvipfinancialeducation.com, where you'll find countless testimonials from people just like you who have seen great success using these tactics. Now today, we've built our trainings for thousands of different companies and individuals, providing online and on-site classes completely free of charge, just like you're participating in now. The information that we teach has become so popular over the past few years that organizations of all sizes have asked us to build similar education for their employees or members. You can see a few of them here, companies like NASA through FFW, Chicago Title, CEO Space, and many of the largest real estate agencies, including RE/MAX professionals. We've also found a home with countless real estate investor associations, as well as the police department. In fact, the police chief, Jim May, had this feedback. When I first saw this, I thought, holy smokes. It was very informative and a great process. We love having the classes at the station, and we are really making great progress with our coach and can't wait until the next class. To verify our reputation further, online, I encourage you to see our A+ Better Business Bureau rating, as well as additional information pertaining to our 100% debt-free classes through NASA. Here's a brief testimonial from Karen Myers about that. I am the program director that's been offering the VIP debt-free education to the employees of NASA. In one word, awesome. We've received wonderful feedback and we plan to increase the availability of this curriculum. I would strongly recommend this curriculum to anyone. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping details now, and then we're going to get right into the fun stuff immediately. My mission here today is to show you concepts that can change your life. However, there is far too much to cover in a short training, which can make it difficult for some viewers to absorb it all the first time, and we also cover a lot very quickly. Therefore, to get the most from this training, make sure you turn your phone off and remain distraction-free. Also, make sure you write down your questions, because immediately following this class, I'm going to show you how to schedule your complimentary 1-hour private coaching session, and we'll invite you to visit the website to review any of these chapters over and over again with absolutely no obligations. Before we dive in, please note that this presentation is for educational purposes only. We're going to conservatively estimate the numbers in order to help simplify this training, and we always do our absolute best to ensure accuracy of the education. However, inexactness is realistic, and results always vary. In some cases, we do protect names as well for anonymity purposes. The training is also not a substitute for investment, legal, or tax advice, and it's not a promotion for my products or services. In fact, there's absolutely nothing for you to buy here today. For guidance pertaining to your specific situation or the governing laws in your state, please consult with a qualified specialist. Now, regardless of your current financial situation, the fundamental principles of what we're going to discuss today will work for you in some way. You could be either rich or poor, young or old, maybe you work for somebody else or for yourself. The bottom line is this: if your financial circumstances right now are awesome, this training can make them better. And if your circumstances aren't as strong as you want, the strategies in this training can improve them, as long as you put the education to use. Because this information can be confusing when you hear it for the first time, it's important for us to demonstrate the 7-step solution through a real-life example. The Albright family has been kind enough to allow us to share their story with you, which will hopefully impact your life as it's done for thousands of people who face similar equations. So we're going to go through a chronological roadmap of the exact steps that they're taking in order to show you how much things can actually improve when you quit playing the game the way that you may have been taught. Now, obviously, everybody has different circumstances in life, but almost everyone can relate to this story. However, even though the concepts will also work for you, they will need to be customized totally differently to work with your unique circumstances. So make sure you schedule your free personal coaching session immediately following the training. So let's review the bird's eye summary of the 7 steps, and then I'm going to circle around and demonstrate the big ones in detail. It all started one day when Megan attended one of our live classes, teaching very similar concepts. And I specifically remember seeing her standing off to the side after I was done presenting. And usually I have several people who will approach me with their questions. As I was loading my car that night, it was a cold, snowy evening in Denver. I remember she came up, drew her hand, and extended it to introduce herself, and she thanked me for the class. And I remember noticing the emotional impact that her money was clearly having on her physically. I could see the stress and the fear in her eyes, and even though we only spoke for a couple minutes, I noticed that she may burst into tears. Money can be very emotional. Your money is probably emotional to you, and my money is emotional to me. It's very hard to separate emotion from our finances. She made it very clear to me that in spite of the hope that she felt from the class, she was certain that she and Dan had created a mess that they'd never be able to clean up. When we first met Dan and Megan, they were renting a property, and they had already accumulated almost $50,000 in non-mortgage related debts. Although they had a lot of hopes and goals, they really had no plan to speak of. So the first step is always the same. We want to establish the top financial goals over the next 5 years. And this is going to be your first step as well. So sit down with your significant other, if you have one, and define your top 5 financial goals over the next 5 years. Your goals can include lifestyle objectives like a new vehicle or travel. It could include retirement or college planning objectives. Perhaps your list also includes credit scoring or debt elimination related goals. The second step is to complete the cash flow cruncher. It's about a 30-minute process, and one of the gifts that I'm going to provide for you in exchange for helping us improve our classes with your feedback is a free copy of this fabulous comprehensive cash flow cruncher spreadsheet. I'm going to be referencing that spreadsheet throughout today's example in order to help you become more familiar and comfortable with it. Once the cash flow cruncher is complete, step 3 just takes a few minutes. The first step is to review the cash flow, and we define cash flow here as the difference between what you earn and what you spend. The best way to organize this number is to calculate monthly averages. For most people, income and expenses are rarely consistent. We pay for certain items more irregularly, and life has this strange way of always throwing us unexpected costs. And if you're self-employed, income certainly isn't consistent. When you operate off of averages, the tactics that I'm going to teach you here today work regardless of inconsistencies. In this case, Dan was self-employed and Megan was W-2'd. The most effective game plan for this, if you are self-employed, is to create 2 cash flow crunchers. Create one for your business and one for your household so that you can identify both your personal and your professional cash flow. Secondly, you'll need to review your FICO credit scores. Credit scores are used by the banks to determine our borrowing strength. And the credit scoring formula that's most commonly used by the banks is called the FICO credit score, which was created by Fair Isaac. Now, I was fortunate enough to study under John Olsheimer, one of the creators of the original FICO credit score, and we spent nearly a decade teaching the hidden secrets to maximizing both personal and business credit. And this is an important piece to today's discussion. Completing steps 1 through 3 should take you no more than an hour of time and a couple weeks to get to. For most people, it happens within the next 7 days of watching this initial training. Completing the first 3 steps then allows you to identify ways which you can use to increase less than perfect credit scores or protect strong credit scores. It's also the time to begin plugging leaks inside your cash flow cruncher. Plugging leaks does not mean giving up things that you like to do. We're going to show you a way to preserve your lifestyle, but just spend less to do it. Nearly everyone who follows our direction will plug in excess of $100 on average each month, and sometimes it's even more than $1,000 on average each month. Don't get caught up in the idea that you're going to have to go on a budget to apply what we're going to teach you here today. That's one of the best parts about it. The 5th step in this process is to identify both new and existing debt weapons. Most people already have debt weapons. They just don't know how to use them properly. Whether you have some now or not, at no point in time should you ever stop getting more, meaning you'll always be looking for more debt weapons. I'll be educating you today on debt weapons and what you need to know. Now, once you have debt weapons, you go to battle and you begin accelerating the attack of your non-mortgage and business-related debts. You also go on and attack your mortgages, and then you go on and you invest more quickly. And we're going to discuss the 4 most important factors involved in attacking non-mortgage related debts shortly. In a very short period of time, we had built a plan for Dan and Megan to eliminate all of their non-mortgage related debts, which totaled almost $50,000. And the best part is they avoided all the pitfalls of debt settlement or debt consolidation. And finally, just 3 years after we met the Albrights, we'd increased their cash flow from a dangerous average of only $390 a month, indicated here on day 30, all the way to over $2,000 a month with the exact same income by helping them follow the first 6 steps. And I'm going to show you exactly how that happened here today. At this point, they purchased their first family home, and they worked with one of our coaches to design an 8.5-year payoff plan as well as an investment plan to acquire additional rental properties and significantly accelerate their payoff as well. Even though the first 3 steps should all take place within days or weeks of seeing this class, steps 4 through 7 are ongoing, and it'll just become a part of your everyday life. There were 3 specific techniques that the Albrights learned from this training that really put them on the fast track. They were called lump sum payments, paycheck parking, and cash flow stacking. And we're going to be reviewing those techniques in detail. On a side note, sometimes people wonder, how do we get paid? Because so much of what we provide is totally free. VIP generates 100% of its revenue by providing a variety of solutions to people who want help implementing these strategies. Our primary service is a 2-year ongoing personal phone coaching membership. Now, unfortunately, not everybody qualifies, but for those who do, it's guaranteed to work. So we're very particular about whom we allow to participate. As we review this example today, what I want you to do is decide if you feel like the investment that Dan and Megan made in the coaching was a good decision for them. I'd like to do something really fun and exciting for this training. I'm going to start with the end first, and then I'm going to backtrack in time through each one of these steps to show you how they received their results. And I'm going to do that because I'm anxious for you to get excited about your own circumstances. I want to do that by demonstrating to you rapid fire mortgage elimination, and that it's possible to prevent hundreds of payments and save hundreds of thousands of dollars on each piece of real estate. This is where you'll first start to see cash flow stacking in action. If all you have is a mortgage and no other debts, as well as a great credit score, this portion of today's training is tailor-made for you. Now, if you do have consumer debts or less than perfect credit or both, those are just simply obstacles, and we can help you overcome that in order to achieve what we're about to discuss. Please remember to share this education with those you care about if you recognize the tremendous value that it can have on our economy. Now, in some cases, keeping a mortgage temporarily to exploit further or greater returns or maximize investment strategies is appropriate. However, the often misleading tax write-off argument is easily overpowered, and the personal and financial benefits of living mortgage-free more quickly are typically far more advantageous. Now, this is where I'd like to challenge you to think about interest rates in a totally different way than you ever have before. Who taught you that interest rates are important? For most people, it was either the banks or their parents or both. And when you think about who taught your parents, most likely it was their banks and their parents. Have you ever noticed how the banks continually change their rules, either adding fees or charging for services in order to increase their profits? That's because all banks are in business to make money, and that money comes from you and me, their clients. Therefore, the rules that they create, by nature of our relationship with them, are primarily one-sided in favor of them, the banks. This leads us, consumers, and you, to perceive different things. And one of the things that most of us have perceived in life is that high interest rates are bad and low interest rates are good. When in reality, the only number that matters is the total volume of interest costs. For example, most people would rather pay 4% APR on a $100,000 loan than 18%, and rightfully so. But if the 18% loan was paid off in 10 months and the 4% APR loan took 30 years or 360 months to pay off, I'm willing to bet that you'd change your mind and prefer the 18% loan. The fact is, you don't really care about the interest rate itself. You've just been convinced by someone, possibly the banks, that you should. The number that the wealthy care about is the total interest costs. That's why leverage can be both powerful and also very dangerous. The fact is, leverage can be just as great or better in the short term as it can in the long. And if the bank wants long term, you probably don't. See, the second half of the equation that is equally, if not more important, is the element of time. This document here is called a truth in lending statement, and unfortunately we have to sign one of these every time we get a new mortgage. The reason that it's such an awful document to look at is because it reveals the total interest that your mortgage will cost you. In our example, Dan and Megan would pay more than $283,000 in interest if they follow their loan program for a full 30 years, which is 360 months. This means that the total cost to own their property, if they took 30 years to pay it back, is over $500,000. That's the $290,000 in principal plus the $283,000 in interest, totaling close to $575,000. That's pretty scary, isn't it? Now, luckily, there are several ways to prevent as much as 80% of this unwanted interest, which will hopefully get your attention. Now, the technique I'm going to walk you through today is the easiest for many of our coaching students to follow through with. And the key to finding a great plan for yourself is finding one that you can follow every month. It won't matter how great the plan is if you don't use it. So at this point in our relationship, Megan and Dan have already eliminated nearly $50,000 in credit cards and auto loans, and now they're building their plan to avoid as much unnecessary interest on their mortgage as they can. Now, in order to avoid this extra interest and expedite the reduction of their mortgage debt, they focused on leveraging two different debt weapons. Throughout the first 3 years following learning about VIP, they had acquired over $78,000 in various debt weapons. One debt weapon was a $25,000 unsecured line of credit, which they learned to use in a totally new way. You'll better understand the concept of debt weapons by the end of this training, and will also be invited to participate in other free trainings that focus on specific types of debt weapons. Dan and Megan's combined monthly household income averaged approximately $5,950, and their new mortgage payment and living expenses averaged approximately $3,925 per month. Now, if you take their net income of $5,950 and you subtract the $3,925, the total cash flow each month on average was approximately $2,025. Your cash flow cruncher will calculate this number for you. Now, once we know their cash flow, we can calculate the maximum lump sum, or MLS, and the MLS is the maximum amount that they'll be able to safely and comfortably borrow from the debt weapon. Now, to calculate your MLS, simply multiply your cash flow by 10. For Dan and Megan, this totaled $20,250. Please note that credit scores are easily impacted when debt weapons are not used properly. So knowing the actual lump sum, or ALS, to apply from a specific debt weapon based on your specific circumstances is important if you want to avoid harming your credit. Make sure you take advantage of the free phone coaching session before applying any lump sum payments. In the case of the Albrights, we determined their ideal ALS to be $20,000 versus the MLS of $20,250. The first step they took after they had their ALS was to apply this lump sum payment of $20,000 towards their new mortgage. Now, this counted as the current month's mortgage payment, and it also reduced their mortgage balance to nearly $270,000. However, you'll immediately notice that this also creates a new $20,000 balance on their debt weapon, which they're going to need to pay off. Because we calculated their MLS and ALS using a 10 times multiple, we can expect that once they implement the paycheck parking technique that we're going to walk through, the debt weapon balance will be eliminated in 10 to 12 months. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, well, what happens to the payment and the interest costs that are associated with this new debt weapon, right? Well, first, Dan and Megan will be leveraging the paycheck parking technique every month, which means they will pay an average of $5,950 toward the balance each month, which counts as the payment. This simple strategy also begins to compress the average daily balance on this debt weapon for an average of 20 to 28 days every month, which reduces the amount of interest that the bank is able to compound daily against them. Furthermore, it puts all of their income to work for them nearly every day of the year. What this means is that the Albrights are no longer allowing their money to sit in a checking or a savings account where it's only working on behalf of the banks. Instead, they're effectively earning the same rate of interest, which they are preventing by parking the income until it's needed to pay expenses and bills. When funds are needed, they simply leverage the debt weapon again for the needed funds, thereby treating their debt weapons the same way they would their checking or savings account. When this is done correctly, it in no way increases risk because they're not increasing their debt any higher than what they originally had. Now, I'm going to continue to run through our example and show you how these two techniques helped the Albrights save hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. There are several other strategies that might suit your individual financial situation better that we won't have time to go over today, and we'll determine that during your free coaching session. But until then, I invite you to visit the website, watch these concepts in action over and over until you mathematically understand the model. Instead of them paying their $5,950 into their checking account, they're going to paycheck park it into this debt weapon. It works the same way that their checking account does. They can pay $5,950 of the $20,000 that they borrowed, which reduces the balance to about $14,050. At the end of month one, they then leverage the debt weapon to pay their personal and business expenses of $2,325, which increases the balance of the debt weapon again to approximately $16,375. Now, in the second month, Dan and Megan just repeat this process. They paycheck park dropping the debt weapon balance to about $10,425, and then further reduce the total interest costs that they'll incur. At the end of month 2, they now have another mortgage payment due and their $2,325 of living expenses. Therefore, by the end of month 2, they'll owe approximately $14,350 on this account. Now they've entered into something called full cycle. Full cycle means that each month from here on until the debt weapon is paid back, the Albrights will paycheck park $5,950 into their debt weapon and pay the total of $3,925 in total expenses. Therefore, every month that passes, the total balance on their debt weapon reduces by an average of $2,025, which is their cash flow each month. The remaining math on this cycle is easy. We just simply take this $14,350 and we divide it by the cash flow in order to calculate the total remaining months that it'll take them to completely pay off their debt weapon. That total is 7.1. And after accounting for the first 2 months that they already paid, the total is approximately 9.1 months. We also need to factor in the interest that's been accumulating on the balance. For this example, let's use a relatively high interest rate of 18%, which we convert into an $1,823 amount during the full term. Most debt weapons, however, are only a 7 to 10% interest rate. But it's important that we exaggerate that interest rates are simply interesting. Borrowing with higher rates over a shorter term can result in significantly less interest. With our strategy of paycheck parking, we pay debt back very quickly, which means that even with high interest rates, there's not much interest cost associated with the debt, especially compared to the long-term impact of the 5.2% mortgage APR over the full mortgage term. From this point forward, we know that implementing this strategy, Megan and Dan's mortgage debt can be reduced by approximately $20,000 every 10 months at a total interest cost of $1,823 each time. Let's use VIP's Cash Flow Cruncher spreadsheet now to look at the mathematical impact of this strategy. For this example, we'll be using the Cash Flow Cruncher loan calculator page. To learn about all the pages in the Cash Flow Cruncher tool, please see our short tutorial on the website after you schedule your free coaching session. As you can see, I've input their balance here of $290,000. Here's the interest rate and the total interest costs of $283,000. Let's go to payment number 1 and see what happens when Megan and Dan leverage the $20,000 lump sum payment from the debt weapon. Pay close attention up here to the number of payments saved, the number of years saved, and the total interest saved. You could immediately see that by leveraging their debt weapon just one time, Dan and Megan were able to prevent $64,000 in interest on this mortgage. Now watch what happens when we apply another $20,000 lump sum in month 11 after they've paid off the first lump sum. And you can plainly see that they will prevent over $111,000. Furthermore, nearly 8 years have already been eliminated off this mortgage in just 11 months by using a tool that the banks provided to them. It makes you wonder why we aren't being taught this in school, doesn't it? These techniques and others work whether you've been in your mortgage for 10 years or 10 days. They also work even if you plan to sell your home early. Wouldn't it be great if you could eliminate 100 or even 200 payments just like that? Finally, let's review the same example using the visual of your typical mortgage amortization schedule. You can see here the red displays the total interest and the gray the principal of each payment throughout the full loan term. Most of the interest is paid at the beginning because your loan amount is the largest early in the term. And because Americans are persuaded to refinance every 3 to 7 years, according to NAR, the vast majority of a mortgage payment for the average person is going toward interest cost, regardless of the rate. But what happens if we use our lump sum payments and paycheck parking tactics to reduce the mortgage balance by $20,000 every 10 months? We end up advancing down the amortization schedule by approximately 4.5 years and save substantial amounts of interest that would have accumulated during that time. This literally means that when Megan and Dan leverage their debt weapon to apply a $20,000 lump sum from the debt weapon, their next mortgage payment will cover the same amount of principal as it would have had they been paying on the loan for 4.5 years, yet it's only the second month. Watch the results of repeating this process until the mortgage is paid in full. The original balance producing the $283,000 in interest over the course of 30 years now becomes just $72,500, which means that they were able to save a total of $210,000 in interest and avoid over 21 years of payments. So now you've seen the plan that was created to pay off Dan and Megan's real estate. That's when they started to invest in more properties as well. Their plan really began to grow rapidly because they're acquiring income-producing assets, which drives the cash flow higher and then accelerates the cash flow stacking concept. But they could have never gotten here had we not first designed a plan to pay off all of their consumer debts. So let's do that now and take a look. This often is one of the most popular video chapters of the training because in this example, we'll see exactly how the Albright family designed this plan to eliminate $50,000 in non-mortgage debts and avoid countless interest costs. So now you know that in the mortgage elimination example, the best techniques were called lump sum payments, paycheck parking, and cash flow stacking. And we'll be reviewing those same techniques again in this chapter in order to help you become even more familiar. But there are many different techniques that we use. We currently have 17 techniques to maximize credit scores. We use 34 to drive cash flow higher. We have 28 to reduce or eliminate debt. And we've been using a total of 16 debt weapons that we refer to daily. This means that there are infinite combinations between these. And the reason I bring this up is because you'll not be using the exact same technique puzzle that we've built for Dan and Megan. That's why we've included the free private implementation counseling session with this class in exchange for your feedback form. We don't want you to practice these techniques the wrong way and end up hurt. To strategically eliminate all of your non-mortgage and business debts quickly, there are 4 main factors that should be considered. And the first is rarely taught. It's called target rates. Now, target rates are different than interest rates. Target rates are calculated by taking the minimum payment on any debt and dividing it by the balance of that debt. The higher the target rate, the more money you spend each month in relation to that balance, which means that you gain the most cash flow from that account when it's paid off in full. Your cash flow cruncher spreadsheet will calculate this number easily for you. Don't forget, we've made the cash flow cruncher available completely for free to all visitors who submit their feedback after viewing the entire training. The next factor to consider is the type of account. For example, a revolving account, such as a credit card, will reduce your minimum payment relative to your balance, whereas an installment account like an automobile loan does not, and this will play a role in your planning process. The third factor is the impact to credit scores. If something is going to have an adverse effect to your credit scores, it's often encouraged to take another approach. For example, borrowing on a revolving account generally has a far greater impact to a credit score than borrowing on an installment account. On the other hand, paying off installment accounts on vehicles, for example, rarely has as much positive impact to a credit score as paying off a revolving account. The final factor to consider when looking at strategically eliminating non-mortgage and business-related debts is that of interest rates. As you've seen here today, interest rates rarely matter as much as the banks want us to believe, but they still matter. If you borrow short-term, even with a higher interest rate, you pay less than borrowing long-term with lower interest rates, and this is evidenced throughout this training. We'll be considering all 4 of these factors as we walk through the Albright non-mortgage debt elimination example. Now keep in mind, we're going backwards in time. This was before they ever owned their house, and at this stage, Dan and Megan were very nervous about their family's safety because they had accumulated nearly $50,000 in non-mortgage related debts, and it was costing them a minimum of $1,135 every month. It was for that reason that the Albrights decided that it would be the right decision to enroll in the VIP coaching program, even though they didn't yet have a mortgage. So we were able to help them get out from underneath this burden. They were also very anxious to apply the same techniques to their real estate goals as quickly as possible, which you've seen is working very well for them. At this time, they had the same average after-tax income of about $5,950. Their rent payment was about the same as their new mortgage, and with the debt servicing, their expenses totaled about $5,050 each month on average. With these 2 numbers, we calculated the average cash flow through the cash flow cruncher, and it just takes the average income and subtracts the average expenses. And at this point, Dan and Megan's cash flow was about $900 every month, which was up quite a bit from the $400 in cash flow just a few months earlier. Let's assume for a moment that they had decided not to change their behavior from the day we met them. How long do you think it would have taken them to pay off this $50,000? Now, historically, almost everybody would agree that it would likely take them longer than 10 years, if ever. They would continue to accept that debt is just a normal way of life. And you can probably imagine how much interest they would have paid. Have you ever thought about the total interest that you've paid over the last 10 to 15 years? These techniques will drastically reduce this cost for you moving forward. Once we calculated cash flow, we then calculate the maximum lump sum again. To calculate the maximum lump sum, or MLS, for non-mortgage and business-related debts, multiply the after lump sum cash flow by 12 months. Cash flow typically goes up after you make a lump sum because you're paying accounts off. For Dan and Megan, this totaled $15,420. However, we determined their ideal ALS to borrow from their brand new debt weapon, which was $20,000 of available, to be $14,900. And we agreed that this would best be used to pay off the balances of their credit cards first. Now, this step not only drove their cash flow to almost $1,300 per month, but it also forced their credit scores much higher. However, just like the mortgage elimination plan, it also creates a new $14,900 balance on their debt weapon, which they're now going to need to pay off. Because we calculated the MLS and ALS using a 12 times multiple, we can again expect that once they implement paycheck parking, the Albrights will pay off this $14,900 in approximately 1 year. Again, Dan and Megan will be leveraging the paycheck parking technique every month, which will also count as that month's debt weapon payment. We're also going to add the interest costs on this debt weapon in at the end so that it's not forgotten. Let's run through this example and watch how these two techniques helped Dan and Megan save years of interest costs and how you can do the same thing. After Dan and Megan paycheck park $5,950 towards this debt weapon, at the end of month 1, they again leverage the debt weapon to pay the $4,665 worth of living expenses. And that increases the balance of the debt weapon, which brings the total at the end of month 1 to approximately $13,615. Because they are immediately in full cycle, meaning that every month until the balance is paid back in full, Dan and Megan will paycheck park $5,950 into the debt weapon and then pay the total expenses of $4,665. Which means every month that passes, the total balance on their debt weapon is reduced by an average of $1,285, which is the cash flow. And it makes it so easy to do the math. All we have to do is take the original $14,900 and divide it by the $1,285 cash flow, and it will determine for us the total number of months that it will take Dan and Megan to completely pay off this lump sum amount before the interest is added in. The total term of this cycle will be 11.6 months. Now let's factor in the interest that's been accumulating on the balance. For this example, let's continue using a relatively high interest rate of 18%. At 18%, the interest cost on this balance during that term is $1,414. Let's take a look at the mathematical impact of this same strategy on their car loans. They then consider the same 4 factors, which designs the best plan, which we determined was to pay off auto loan number 1, even though it was a slightly better interest rate than auto loan number 2, because it gave us more cash flow. By this time, the balance on the vehicle had been paid down slightly to about $16,500. So they started with a lump sum amount from the available, and by using $16,500 of the $20,000 they had, they again paycheck park their average income of $5,950. And that eliminates any additional payments as well as compresses the average daily balance that's accruing. The balance thereby reduces for the majority of the month to about $10,550 in month 1. And then at the end of the month, they again leverage to pay their $4,215 worth of monthly expenses. And that leaves the average cash flow parked in the debt weapon employed as opposed to unemployed in their checking or savings account. Again, the math to calculate a full cycle term is super easy. You just simply take the original balance of $16,500 and divide it by the cash flow, and that will calculate the payoff term prior to adding the interest costs. The total here is 9.5 months, and when we add the interest of $1,237 to the total payoff term in this cycle, it totals just over 10 months for cycle 2. Let's go ahead and fast forward through their final auto loan cycle and take a look at the results of this plan. As you can see here, the first 2 cycles, when added to that final cycle, was just 30.9 months, and it only took the Albrights about 5 months to initially drive their credit scores up and acquire their first debt weapon. So in total, the outcome was achieved in less than 3 years. It makes you also wonder why this isn't taught in school, doesn't it? Take a look at their progress over that 3-year period. You may have just $5,000 in debt, or you may have $150,000 in debt. It doesn't matter. There's almost always a better way to eliminate years of interest and stress by using techniques like these. We've been talking a lot about debt weapons, so this is generally the most anticipated chapter in this training because we'll see exactly what debt weapons are and how they can help the average consumer or business owner accelerate most financial goals. Here's a fun little fact. 82% of viewer audiences will rate these classes an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10. So let us know what you think today at the end of the training. And if you're enjoying this information, please share the website with everyone you care about. Whether it's investing in real estate, traveling, growing your business, or eliminating all of your debts quickly, debt weapons can put you on the fast track and are available to anyone. Earlier, you saw how Dan and Megan Albright constructed their plan to avoid over 250 mortgage payments on their home and pay off nearly $50,000 in debts. The techniques that they used and many others would have never been possible without the proper use of debt weapons. Over the past 12 years, VIP has located dozens of different tools to accelerate financial goals, which you'll now need to know a few basic details about. So let's start by asking, what the heck is a debt weapon? Simply put, debt weapons are tools which allow you to keep your money working for you in a variety of ways nearly every day. Literally, anyone can experience extraordinary benefits from proper use of debt weapons, and I'm going to introduce you to them now. Now, although VIP has sponsors and alliances with different institutions and individuals who provide our students preferred access to debt weapons, we do not sell or profit from the most common debt weapons. We simply coach people where to find them and what to use them for. So why should you care in the first place? What does this really mean to you? Well, there are 7 primary reasons to look for and use debt weapons from this point forward in your life. First, they can rapidly increase your cash flow. The more cash flow you have, the more choices you have. The less cash flow you have, the fewer choices you'll have. As you've seen firsthand today, debt weapons compress amortization schedules, which allows you to pay off your loan balances in a fraction of the time. They also allow you to replace the inadequacies of your bank accounts. And when you think about it, bank accounts are used not because they pay you well, obviously, but because they're convenient, they're safe, and they're liquid. Debt weapons are all of these things as well, but they provide you far greater monetary value. Debt weapons also help you invest more quickly. For example, you can use debt weapons as down payments. You can use them as fix-up costs. You can use them as a source of capital for education, for coaching, for typical and non-conventional opportunities. They can also be used for marketing or staffing your business. Debt weapons seemingly provide endless uses as an investment vehicle. They will also minimize the total interest costs when they're used properly, and that's been demonstrated that they can prevent as much as 80% of total interest on loans. And finally, they drive your credit scores higher. For example, some debt weapons even let you hide various balances from your credit reports and cause enormous positive impacts to your credit scores. Lastly, access to debt weapons will cause tremendous safety for you and your family. As long as you can remain responsible and disciplined, there really are no downsides to having them. So let's talk about specifics. Here are some examples of debt weapons that we refer our coaching members to currently. The top half include debt weapons that the banks themselves provide, and the bottom half are examples of debt weapons provided outside of the banks. Both lists change often. They are added and removed as often as the banking industry modifies itself. Each debt weapon will generally offer you more than one benefit when it's used properly, although they don't necessarily all achieve the same results. Because debt weapons do change so frequently, and we have limited time in this chapter, we've put the definitions of these acronyms inside your cash flow cruncher that you'll get when you complete your brief feedback form. Also, debt weapons in gold have been made into additional free classes, so access will be provided once you've submitted your feedback form. Although these tools can benefit anyone, the four most important questions that will require an answer before you should go out and search for one are: which debt weapon should I get? Where should I go to get it? When is the right time to apply for it? And what purpose will it serve once I have it? VIP does extensive research every week to answer these questions because the answers change as often as the banking rules. We have an entire interview process performed by a staff member who calls banks, calls credit unions, calls private lenders, researches websites for anywhere between 5 to 20 hours each and every week using this checklist. Now, it's time-consuming work, but we have it down to a science, and when you share the information with thousands of coaching students, it makes sense economically for us to do this. To some, this is even considered one of the greatest value adds of our coaching program. One of the greatest and most consistent qualifiers between these debt weapons that we've identified through this research for years and years, which you must take note of, is that you should not apply for any debt weapon without first having a 700 FICO personal score. With a 700 credit score or better, you can obtain between $2,000 and $150,000 per debt weapon, and at no point should you ever be done looking for more. On average, the best pace is trying to get 2 to 4 debt weapons each year. However, we can accomplish many of the same results with fewer, even if they're not large. Now, once we've received your feedback, you'll be emailed access to a free training that will pull the curtain back on this and other amazing debt weapons. So make sure your feedback details are legible. I would like to warn you that one of the only times you should minimize the credit available to yourself is if you're not financially responsible. However, if you are financially responsible or you believe that you could be with a coach, there's no such thing as having too much credit. Some financial experts argue that you should cut off the available credit that you have to yourself, and that's just simply not beneficial to you if you can manage to be responsible with it. The available capital helps you achieve your goals far more quickly and protect your great credit scores. Many experts agree with me that you need access to reserves in case of emergency. And I'm here to teach you today that your money does not have to sit unemployed in a checking or a savings account in order to be available for emergencies. It can protect you just as well, if not better, through proper use of debt weapons. Now, this is the final chapter here today, because the Albright's ability to access specific debt weapons would have never been possible without a general education and understanding about the mysterious and often confusing personal credit scoring system and how they could take control over their credit scores. Over the past decade, we've been providing people with less than perfect credit access to the 760 Club. Now, the 760 Club has been called one of the most advanced credit scoring education and enhancement programs in the country. And we're very excited to bring you part of that education here today. Now, because we only have a few minutes left, I'm going to minimize the content of this section because not everybody cares or needs all the details about credit scores right now. Therefore, I'll make sure you're given a complimentary e-copy of Edward Jamison's book called Even the Score when we receive your feedback form. Edward is an attorney that we hired who is widely recognized as the leading credit attorney in the country. Furthermore, there is space for you to include credit information on your cash flow cruncher so that it can be reviewed by our certified coaches in your free session. And if you'd like more credit information than what is provided in this training, I also invite you to watch the 8-minute videos on the website under the 100% Debt-Free for Life training. After delaying for years, the credit industry finally agreed to provide consumers access to their personal credit scores, typically for a cost. Now, without proper education, many consumers have been unable to leverage this tool properly. Having access to this is similar to being handed a treasure map because lenders use credit scores to determine who to give credit to and at what rates. Knowing how to read your credit map can be very empowering. If your credit scores are low, you can take steps to improve your worthiness, and if your credit scores are high, you might be able to take key steps to protect and leverage in order to reach your goals far more quickly. It's important to begin this chapter by teaching you that not all credit scores are the same. This means that when you go to a website and you pull your credit, you may not be looking at the same score that the banks see. And in some cases, the difference between the scores can be detrimental. According to Fair Isaac, 90 of the top 100 largest U.S. financial institutions use the FICO credit score to make decisions about you. Now, the FICO score is a number that summarizes your credit risk. So lenders use it to make credit decisions, such as your borrowing strength and the interest rate that you'll get. Visit myfico.com to access the only website that you can get your real FICO scores without a hard inquiry. FICO scores range from 300 to 850 points. The lower the score, the higher the speculated risk to creditors. Now, because every lender has a different model of what's acceptable, there's really no standard scale. As an overall guideline, the average FICO score is approximately 725. To qualify for the best loan, borrowers will generally need scores above a 760. Anyone with scores below a 760 have work to do. And anyone with scores below a 620 will pay significantly higher interest rates and will often not even be approved until the scores are improved. People who want to play by the VIP rules being taught in this training will need a minimum FICO score of 700 or better, as we discussed earlier. Keep in mind that lenders look at many things when they make a credit decision about you that go way beyond just your scores, including your income, how long you've worked at your present job, and the kind of credit that you're requesting. Since they factor in this additional information and often consider special circumstances, lenders may credit you when other areas are strong, even if your scores are low. And they can also refuse to lend to you even if your scores are high. Still, your credit scores count heavily in your ability to access debt weapons, which is important if you're going to benefit from the techniques that are demonstrated in this training. Now, when we first met Dan and Megan, they both had scores below the minimum that was needed, which is okay. It just means that it's an obstacle that we needed to help them work around and improve. With some very basic education found in the short videos on the website, they managed to increase their scores in less than 3 months. Now, this took place at the same time they worked on plugging leaks in their cash flow cruncher. And plugging leaks is a process where several areas of spending are evaluated in order to preserve lifestyle but spend less. Here is a basic overview of the 3 primary categories to consider. First, tax planning. If you're receiving a refund every year, for example, you're basically lending your cash flow to the IRS for free and they return it to you once per year. It's not a good plan. Secondly, living expenses. Eliminating expenses that you don't need anymore, paying for things on a discount, or reducing insurance costs are great examples of minimizing outgoing living expenses. And finally, strategic budgeting. And this is where things like promotional interest costs and the more advanced techniques that we've been reviewing today come into play. It's almost unheard of when a consumer or a business owner cannot plug at least $100 per month in leaks, and sometimes it's over $1,000. The exciting news is this. When you plug leaks, the value of the leaks you plug are worth 3 to 5 times their face value because of the interest that can be prevented when you use techniques like lump sum payments and cash flow stacking. So what should you do next? First, you have to commit to getting off your butts. No more excuses. Then simply provide us your feedback form in order to access a variety of free tools to simplify your roadmap. We'll be reviewing your starting point as well as your destination goals with you at no charge through the private implementation coaching session. We're going to start your short-term plan by just simply reverse engineering your long-term goals. And you just need to be disciplined and accountable to it month in and month out, just like you are right now with your current plan. This process will never require you to disclose any confidential financial information to us, and it can be easy when we break it into these small, simple steps. So let's review your steps. Step 1, fill out the feedback form, teach us how we can improve, share what you like and what you don't about our training. Step 2, we enter your feedback into our system and you'll automatically be emailed your very own cash flow cruncher and your credit scoring book called Even the Score. Step 3, immediately schedule your free one-on-one phone coaching session where you can determine which techniques from this class and others you're missing from your plan. If coaching does end up making sense for you and you are qualified to become a member, there are unlimited coaching sessions provided to you over the phone, so you can be anywhere in the United States and conveniently get coached. We unfortunately do not coach outside of this country yet. However, we do allow people outside the US to refer and generate revenue as an affiliate. As a coaching member, your certified coach will simply put your action steps here on the left after each phone coaching session. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, Step 4. Before each session, you quickly put the results here on the right. And the average coaching student only ends up spending 2 to 4 hours per month building and following a plan like this. It's really no more than an extra 40 hours a year to have a plan that will increase savings by as much as $50,000 every year. Most people would have no trouble putting in an extra 40 hours to generate $50,000. If you don't have a perfect credit score currently, don't worry. All members of our coaching receive access to the 760 Club for free to help you handle imperfect credit scores. This has a $1,500 per person value. Now, because people are generally curious about the price, if they are qualified, the cost of the 2-year unlimited coaching membership is currently $5,210 or $258 per month. But that is expected to increase, so don't delay on your next steps if you are wondering if you're qualified. Also, this cost is possibly tax deductible for business owners because we do coach you on your business as well. However, there are ways to get this coaching seriously discounted and even for free. So the key here is for us to successfully answer the question together, which plan is more expensive, this plan or your current plan? But let's not get ahead of ourselves because ongoing coaching may or may not make sense. Either way, you will need to take action if you want to get any results. So let's get your free coaching session on the calendar. And if it does make sense, they'll share how you can get the discounts and the rebates. Because of our guarantee and the fact that VIP employees are not paid on commission, you can feel confident knowing that there's no way we're going to try and suggest or pressure you to get going for the coaching if we thought that you wouldn't see extraordinary results, which means that if you do pay us, we've got to make sure that we can produce a strong return on that investment by the end of 2 years. Let's put it into perspective with Dan and Megan. They invested in coaching, and a plan was produced that saved them over $64,000 in just one step. Now, if you were able to build a plan with results like these, the decision would be very easy. Here are the last few details that you're going to need. After you complete your feedback form, go to freecoachingcalendar.com to schedule your free coaching session. It's best to have your session within the next 2 weeks at the latest, so don't delay. The free coaching sessions always have a waiting list, and they're provided on a first-come, first-served basis. So schedule yours now and then begin completing your cash flow cruncher right away. Again, to schedule, just go to freecoachingcalendar.com. You can do that right now from your tablet or smartphone before you leave and reserve your free session. You'll also get a free 3D affiliate qualification, meaning that you can begin earning 6 figures per year in addition to what you're making now by working as little as 5 to 10 hours a week, just sharing these free classes with the people you love. Finally, keep your eyes open for emails announcing other fabulous free trainings provided to you exclusively from VIP. If you'd prefer that we call you to schedule your session, just simply mark the box on the feedback form and we'll reach out. Also, I'd like to thank you in advance for only selecting the box for us to call you and only scheduling your session online if you intend to follow through and call us back. We are very, very busy with coaching sessions and coaching students, and I want to prioritize your time if you want to learn more about these resources. Therefore, we appreciate you respecting our busy schedules as well. This is your chance to determine if and how this system can improve your life. If you want to expedite this process, simply go to freecoachingcalendar.com or call to reserve your free session at 866-969-2738. Again, that's toll free, 866-969-2738. Hopefully you've learned something new today. Please be generous with your feedback and take a few minutes to share access to this website with people you care about. And together, we can change the social economics of this country one household at a time, beginning with you. Make it a great day.